He wasn't loud, he wasn't causing trouble. And yet, within minutes, every eye on the plane would be watching him. Because sometimes a single sentence changes everything. And once spoken, it cannot be taken back. If you're drawn to stories that reveal the truth beneath the surface, subscribe to emotional storytelling, because this is where hidden identities come to light. The aircraft cruised steadily above a blanket of clouds, the quiet hum of engines filling the cabin like white noise. Passengers settled into their own worlds, headphones, books, half-finished conversations. Row 14, seat B. He sat calmly, hands resting loosely on his lap, gaze soft but observant. A brown jacket, clean white shirt, simple watch. Nothing flashy. Nothing that demanded attention. And yet, something about him stood out. Not to everyone, just to her. Claire Donovan paused mid-aisle. Her practiced smile faded as she studied him. Something tightened behind her eyes. She took one slow step forward. "Sir," she said. He looked up politely. "Yes?" Her tone shifted, sharper now. "I need to see your boarding pass." He blinked once, slightly surprised but cooperative. "Of course." He handed it over without hesitation. She stared at it longer than necessary. Her jaw clenched. "This seat is business class." "Yes," he said gently. "I was upgraded at the gate." She didn't respond. Instead, she scanned him again. Clothes, posture, presence. Something in her expression hardened. "You need to stand up." The words came suddenly, too loud. Passengers nearby turned their heads. "I'm sorry?" he asked. "I said stand up." The tension arrived instantly, invisible but heavy. He stood slowly, not defensive, not confrontational, just calm. "What seems to be the issue?" Her voice dropped but remained sharp. "You people always think you can bend the rules." The phrase landed like a crack through glass. A woman across the aisle gasped softly. Someone behind them lifted a phone. Silence spread in waves. He inhaled slowly, measured. "I'm not sure what you mean by that," he said quietly. She stepped closer, too close. Her hand grabbed his jacket. "Don't play innocent with me." Gasps. A child stopped talking mid-sentence. The cabin air changed. He didn't pull away immediately. He simply looked at her, not angry, not afraid, just steady. "Please let go," he said gently. Her grip tightened. "I knew something was off the moment you boarded." Passengers whispered, some nodding in agreement, others uncomfortable. The divide formed quickly. Belief versus doubt. Emotion versus observation. The man remained calm. "Can we resolve this professionally?" he asked. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm calling the captain." Minutes later, the overhead announcement broke the quiet. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated while crew handles a situation." The word situation ignited curiosity across the cabin. Phones lifted, eyes followed. He stood in the aisle now, surrounded by attention he never asked for. Another attendant approached, concern written across her face. "Claire, what's happening?" "He doesn't belong in this seat." The second attendant looked at him. He offered a small nod. "I have confirmation if you'd like to see it." Claire ignored him. Instead, she spoke louder for others to hear. "People like him think they can just walk in and take what isn't theirs." The words hit harder this time. Whispers grew louder. Someone muttered, "That's not okay." Another whispered, "Maybe she knows something we don't." He closed his eyes briefly, not in defeat, in patience. The captain was notified. Security arranged upon landing. And just like that, a quiet flight turned into a spectacle. He sat again while they waited, hands folded, breathing steady. While around him, narratives grew without facts. A man leaned into the aisle to film. Two women argued quietly about whether Claire was right. A teenager whispered, "This is going viral." He stared out the window, clouds drifting endlessly, as if none of this mattered up there. Landing felt slower than usual. The wheels touched down with a jolt, and within minutes, uniformed officers stepped onto the plane. The entire cabin held its breath. "Sir," one officer said calmly, "please come with us." He stood without resistance, without anger, without explanation, and as he walked down the aisle, dozens of cameras followed him. Claire watched him go, certain, unshaken, because she believed she had protected everyone. The door closed behind him. The plane fell into restless conversation. Some passengers praised her, others shook their heads. No one knew the full story. Not yet. 20 minutes later, something unexpected happened. A senior airline supervisor boarded, face pale, eyes scanning urgently. "Where is Claire Donovan?" he asked. She stepped forward confidently. "I'm here." He looked at her, long and serious. "We need to talk, now." The confidence in her posture flickered. "What about?" He hesitated, lowered his voice. "That passenger you removed?" "Wasn't just a passenger." Silence. Her stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" The supervisor swallowed. "He's the man who helped design the airline's safety evaluation program." Claire froze. "And he's flying today under a protected identity." The words struck like lightning. Every moment replayed instantly in her mind. Her tone, her grip, her words. "You people!" A cold realization spread through her chest. "What have I done?" she whispered. Back in the cabin, passengers watched her expression change, confidence melting into shock, and for the first time, doubt appeared. Because sometimes the person we judge is the one who understands the system better than anyone else. The plane should have felt lighter after landing. Instead, the weight inside the cabin grew heavier, because doubt had entered, and doubt never sits quietly. Claire Donovan stood frozen near the galley, watching the supervisor speak rapidly into his phone. His voice was low, urgent, the kind of tone used when something irreversible has already happened. Passengers noticed. They always notice when authority becomes uncertain. "What's going on?" someone whispered. Another passenger leaned into the aisle, trying to overhear. Claire swallowed. Her heart beat harder with every second. "He's... who?" she asked again. The supervisor lowered the phone and looked directly at her. "His name isn't Daniel Reed," he said quietly. "That's a protected identity." Her stomach dropped. Protected. The word echoed. "What does that even mean?" she whispered. "It means he travels under security clearance," the supervisor replied. "And we just removed him from his own flight." The cabin seemed to tilt. Claire stepped back slowly. "But the system flagged him." "Yes," the supervisor said carefully. "And that's exactly why this is a problem." Passengers nearby leaned closer, sensing something serious unfolding. "He helped build the identity risk system," the supervisor continued. "He audits it anonymously to check for failures." Claire's breath caught. The realization struck all at once. Every word she said, every assumption she made, every eye watching her now. "You're saying," she began, voice shaking slightly, "that he wasn't the threat?" The supervisor didn't answer immediately, because he didn't need to. A ripple moved through the plane. Passengers who had filmed the confrontation exchanged looks. A woman who had supported Claire earlier now frowned. "That doesn't sound right," she whispered to her husband. A man who had defended Daniel leaned forward slightly, curiosity growing. The energy had changed. And once energy changes, people start questioning what they thought they knew. Claire walked slowly back down the aisle. Each step felt heavier. Every face seemed different now. Some curious, some judgmental, some simply waiting. She reached seat 14B. Empty. The indentation where he sat still visible. Her hand hovered over the armrest. She remembered the calm in his voice, the way he never raised it, the way he asked her politely to let go. Guilt crept in quietly, not loud, not dramatic, just steady and unavoidable. One of the passengers spoke up. "So, was he innocent?" Claire hesitated. "I don't know," she admitted. And for the first time since the confrontation began, she sounded unsure. The supervisor addressed the cabin over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the earlier disruption. The situation is under review." Carefully chosen words, neutral, safe. But the damage had already spread beyond the plane, because phones buzzed with notifications, videos already circulating, opinions already forming. A young woman raised her hand slightly. "Can I ask something?" Claire nodded slowly. "Why did you grab him?" The question hung in the air. Simple, direct, honest. Claire opened her mouth, then closed it, because the answer felt heavier now. "I thought I was protecting everyone," she said quietly. Some passengers nodded. Others looked away. The truth sat somewhere in between. An older man in the back spoke gently. "Sometimes we see danger where there isn't any." No one argued. The plane fell into thoughtful silence. Meanwhile, outside the aircraft, Daniel Reed stood calmly beside two airport officers. No anger, no accusations, just quiet patience. One officer returned from speaking with airline management. "Sir, it appears there was a misunderstanding." Daniel nodded once. "I assumed as much. You're free to continue your travel if you'd like." He glanced back toward the plane. Through the window he could see silhouettes moving inside. He exhaled slowly. "I'd prefer to finish the flight." Minutes later, the door reopened. Passengers turned instantly, and when Daniel stepped back onto the plane, the entire cabin fell silent. Not because they were told to, because they wanted to see. He walked calmly down the aisle, the same measured steps, the same quiet presence. Claire stood near his seat, hands clasped nervously. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither spoke. "I owe you an apology," she said softly. He didn't answer immediately. Not to create tension, just because he chose his words carefully. "You believed you were doing your job," he said gently. Her eyes widened slightly. "You're not angry?" He smiled faintly. "Anger doesn't solve misunderstandings." The words settled into the cabin like calm after a storm. Passengers watched closely, some expecting confrontation. Instead, they saw something else. Grace. Claire hesitated. "They told me you helped build the system." "I did," he replied. "And it flagged you?" "Yes." A small, thoughtful silence followed. "What does that mean?" she asked quietly. He sat down slowly before answering. "It means systems reflect the assumptions of the people who design them." The statement lingered, not accusatory, just honest. The plane prepared for departure again, but something had changed inside it. People were no longer watching a confrontation. They were witnessing reflection, growth, questions. And somewhere in that quiet shift, respect began replacing judgment. But the biggest truth about who Daniel really was had not yet been spoken. And when it finally surfaced, the entire cabin would understand why this flight had been more than coincidence. The engines roared again. The aircraft lifted back into the sky. But this time, no one returned to normal, because something invisible had shifted inside that cabin. Not fear, not tension, awareness. Daniel Reed sat quietly in seat 14B, the same seat, the same posture. But now, every passenger saw him differently, not as a threat, not as a mystery, as a question. Claire remained near the galley longer than necessary, gathering herself, replaying every second, her words, her grip, the silence after. Finally, she walked back toward him, each step slower than the last. "May I?" she asked softly, gesturing to the empty aisle seat beside him. He nodded. She sat. The cabin pretended not to watch, but everyone was listening. "I want to understand," she said. His eyes remained calm. "What would you like to know?" She hesitated. "Why would the system flag you, if you built it?" A faint smile touched his face. "Because I didn't build it alone." He looked forward, voice steady. "I designed the foundation, the safety layers, the protections." A pause. "But after I left, others modified it." "How?" she asked. "They added predictive risk modeling." She frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means the system started calculating probability instead of behavior." The words settled heavily. "Probability based on what?" she whispered. Daniel turned his head slightly. "Patterns, travel frequency, booking timing, data gaps." He didn't need to say more. She understood. Her throat tightened. "And appearance?" she asked carefully. He didn't answer directly, because sometimes silence says more than confirmation. Her eyes lowered. "I trusted it," she admitted. "I know," he replied gently. "I thought I was keeping people safe." "And you were trying to," he said. The distinction mattered. Across the aisle, a man leaned closer, listening openly now. A woman who had filmed earlier slowly lowered her phone. The atmosphere had transformed, not defensive, not hostile, reflective. Claire took a steady breath. "When I grabbed you, you didn't fight back." "No," he said calmly. "Why?" "Because I've learned that escalation convinces people they were right." The sentence struck deeper than accusation ever could. She swallowed. "I judged you." "Yes." There was no bitterness in his voice, just truth. "And I'm sorry." The apology wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it was real. Daniel looked at her fully now. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "this is exactly why I travel anonymously." Her brow furrowed. "To test it?" she asked. "To see if it still treats people fairly." A subtle wave moved through the nearby seats, passengers absorbing every word. "And today?" she asked softly. He held her gaze. "It failed." The weight of that statement settled over the cabin, not as condemnation, as reality. The captain's voice interrupted gently. "Cabin crew, prepare for service." Routine, normalcy attempting to return. But normal had shifted. Claire stood slowly. "I can't undo what happened," she said quietly. "No," he agreed. "But you can influence what happens next." She nodded, determination replacing guilt. As she walked back down the aisle, her posture was different. Not rigid, grounded. Halfway through the flight, something unexpected happened. A passenger in the back stood up. "Excuse me," he called out. The cabin turned. "I just want to say something." He looked toward Daniel. "I filmed earlier. I thought you were suspicious." He hesitated. "But I was wrong." Silence, honest silence. Another passenger added softly, "Me too." One by one, subtle acknowledgments rippled forward. Not dramatic, not forced, just human. Daniel didn't stand. He didn't make a speech. He simply nodded. Because accountability shared in small moments carries more weight than public declarations. As the flight neared its final descent, Claire returned one last time. "I submitted a formal report," she said quietly. "About what happened." He nodded. "And?" "And I requested a review of how flags are interpreted in flight." A faint warmth touched his expression. "That matters." She paused. There's one more thing. He waited. What's your real name? He looked out the window at the fading light. For a moment, it seemed like he might not answer. Then he spoke. Elijah King. The name lingered. And why change it? She asked. He exhaled softly. Because sometimes you have to disappear to fix what you built. The plane began descending, lights flickering softly, a symbolic return to ground. But nothing inside that cabin would ever feel the same. When they landed, no police boarded, no confrontation waited, just an ordinary gate. But as passengers stood to exit, something remarkable happened. They didn't rush past him. They paused, nods, small smiles, unspoken recognition, not of power, not of status, of humanity. Claire stood by the exit door. When Elijah reached her, she met his eyes. Thank you, she said. For what? He asked gently. For letting this be a lesson instead of a war. He gave a quiet smile. Lessons last longer. And with that, he stepped off the plane. Not as a suspect, not as a victim, but as a reminder that systems are built by people and people can choose to see differently. Some passengers would tell this story for years, some would forget it by next week. But the question would remain, if the system hadn't been challenged that day, how many others would have been judged without knowing why? And as another plane prepared for departure somewhere else in the world, one silent traveler boarded, watching, testing, waiting.